Wszystko zaczęło się od króla Jagiełły. Mała Łodzia stała się miastem, które w XIX wieku rozwijało się najszybciej na świecie. W ciągu zaledwie 60 lat od powstania pierwszej manufaktury powstaje przemysłowa, wielonarodowościowa metropolia. Jednak wiatry historii nie zawsze jej sprzyjały. To, co zniszczył los, odbudowują łodzianie. Nasza Łódź. Miasto wielkich szans. Od 600 lat w sercu Polski i Europy.
Jesteśmy Polakami. Jesteśmy niezwykłym społeczeństwem. Zawsze w obliczu wielkiego wyzwania potrafimy się mobilizować. Potrafimy stawić czoła wielkim wyzwaniom. Bo nie potrafimy stać obojętnie. Bo obchodzi nas bezpieczeństwo i przyszłość naszych dzieci. Bo wierzymy, że nadzieja zwycięża apatię, lęk i strach. Bo mimo wszelkich przeciwności nigdy się nie poddajemy. Potrafimy ciężko pracować, wspierać się i działać razem. Bo zależy nam na naszej ojczyźnie, naszym osiedlu, naszej ulicy. Bo chcemy naszych niezbywalnych praw i wolności. Bo nie oddamy naszych marzeń. Nadchodzi punkt zwrotny.
Dzień dobry Państwu, witam.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the discussion co-organized by the Batory Foundation on the Polish-Ukrainian relationships and Ukrainian integration with the European Union. I will introduce my panelists in a moment. We'll speak both Polish and English, so if you need interpretation, the headsets are available at the back of the room. Let me introduce my panelists first, then we'll make a brief introduction and give the floor to my guests, and finally we'll give the floor to the audience, hoping for discussion. Starting from that part of our stage, we've got Julia Kazdobina, political scientist related to Ukrainian Prism Council of Foreign Policy Ukraine. We have Piotr Buras, the director of the European Council on Foreign Relations Office. Danuta Hübner, the first Polish commissioner in the European Union after Poland joined the EU. And online from Kiev, Pawło Klimkin, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, analyst and person commenting on the political reality of Ukraine internationally. Good afternoon, sir. A brief introduction. We are here, but many months before we did not expect it would take place one day after eliminating the embargo on the Ukrainian cereals by the European Union and introducing the embargo by some countries, including Poland, Hungary. So this marks a very important context, which I don't want to start with, although we'll certainly reach it, because it identifies certain tensions that might occur between Poland and Ukraine. That's what our conversation is about. Let me start with reminding to us all of what we are definitely aware of, although we might forget that there is still full-scale Russian aggression on Ukraine and there is war. Ukraine is taking counter-offensive actions. We can see how big a challenge that is. War is brutal, and every day it brings victims that the Ukrainian nation suffers. We remember it, and we are in full solidarity with the Ukrainians. I also feel confirmed by research that we understand the main objectives, including winning the war, as well as such objectives as integration with the European Union and joining the North Atlantic Treaty. The process of integration, this is what I would like to start with. We've got an interesting context. Charles Michel announced recently, or called for what he requested. The European Union was ready for expansion is ready for expansion in 2030. It's not only about Ukraine, but other candidate countries, and a certain date was mentioned, including some promises revealing that this is not only inspiration, but also a number of challenges on the side of the candidates and on the current member states. Nowadays, we would require a number of reforms to implement the process. The first question that goes to my panelists is on the time horizon, whether it's rhetoric or if it can be treated as real, and what are the major challenges for Ukraine. I mean that the Ukraine would have to face in the referenced period of integration. I would like to start with the specialist in the European Union and its mechanism, the Commissioner. I suppose the experience acquired through working for the Commission helps you a lot, and you also are well familiar with the international milieus. So just first comments from you. Initially, I would like to say that I am involved in different relationships with Ukraine, and I have been involved since 1994, when the first partnership with the European Union was signed. Throughout the period, we have observed quite unsuccessful policy of neighborhood from the side of the European Union. As a commissioner, I was teaching my colleagues from Ukraine on how important decentralization is, how important regional policy is. Now I meet with the members of Verkhovna Rada, NGOs, how to prepare Ukraine for the membership, and I share our experiences. I suppose Ukraine can use others' achievements. That's something that Ukraine can do skillfully. I would like to say that last year the European Union made an important geostrategic decision because it moves from the neighbors path to the European Union path, and this is the signal on the system preferred by the European Union, the international order, and where Ukraine belongs. We are waiting for the European Commission's report evaluating Ukraine's preparation and proposal to start negotiations. I'm fully convinced that it will happen by the end of this year, and the sooner the better. I suppose we are all aware that throughout the years Ukraine was on the path towards Europe. Europe is Ukrainians' objective, and this is also a great geopolitical benefit for the whole Europe. It is about expanding the democratic area, which in the light of fight between the systems is important. I suppose Ukraine will play a very important role in the relationships between European Union and Russia, whoever is going to rule in Russia. It will also be a guarantee of peace in the region prone for conflicts. We need to remember the benefits are mutual, but both sides need to be ready for it. All conversations with Ukrainians have revealed that it's not about going shortcuts, that the Ukrainians are fully aware that if they are well prepared, they will use the membership. The fuller it is, the more benefits the Ukraine will get. Charles Michel also referred to a certain period. I don't know if it's going to be a long or short time. In our case, the period between applying and entering the EU was 10 years. Dates are very important in such processes because they mobilize both parties. Sometimes you may not stick to the deadlines, but that's not the point. It's simply to attempt to do it by 2030. If we do it a year later or sooner, it will be a political success, or we'll feel unsatiated from the political point of view. The EU also needs to get ready for it. We've got the Treaty from Nice in our case. The Irish rejected it in the first voting. It included proposals of amending the voting system, and it was indispensable for accepting our membership. Most probably we would need some amendments to the treaty. I can only say that the amendments do not have to appear today or tomorrow. They can be adopted together with the accession treaty. We simply need to implement them because they apply to a number of important issues. Members of the Commission approach to the European budget, voting, and so on and so forth. But nowadays there is no appetite for changes in the Council. The Commission is always the greatest friend of the candidate state, but the Council representatives have different opinions. There is no readiness to implement such amendments, but we are waiting for the results of the election next year, and only then we'll start preparations. The European Parliament is going to end its works on the amendments to the treaty, which will give Ukraine opportunity to join the EU. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to give the floor to Kiev, to Mr. Klimkin. How do you approach the extension process? What perspectives and what challenges do you notice in Ukraine?
Friends, good evening from Kiev, and thanks for standing with Ukraine. Look, as you probably know, I'm a physicist by education, and many years ago, one of my professors told me a story, a joke of life, about Albert Einstein teaching physics in the Zurich University. Once he had exam in physics, he distributed different tests, and one of the students raised his hand and said, "Professor, these are the same tests you gave us 2 years ago." And Einstein said, "Fine, but the answers are different now." So my point is really simple. The answers are different because our way of joining the European Union is not the same like before. The whole process of joining the European Union has to change. And don't get me wrong, I'm not arguing to give up on the merit-based approach. Of course, it's critical. Of course, it's about us to deliver. But what is going on is not just about security, and I mean Ukraine security. It's also about Europe's and EU security. And even more fundamentally, it's about what we believe Europe should look like in the 21st century. What we have pushed is the shift to become Europe of the 21st century for the whole European Union, to have Europe and the European Union completed without gray zones, whether it's about security or trade or sectoral cooperations. And Europe, which could be value-based community, but at the same time, Europe, which should be a real geopolitical player. Because here in Europe, we can't afford that the future geopolitics gonna rotate around the triangle US, China, India. It's definitely also about us. And through this angle, I believe everybody understands Ukraine is an asset. And of course, we are not ideal. We have to deliver on many points. But the whole sense of trying to set up a timeline, whether it's 7 years, and it's not critical here, but it creates a sense of mobilization. It creates the simple sense that political will is there from all the sides. And now it's about delivery, now it's about capacity. And everyone who gonna fail will show his or her failures to everybody. So the process can be just dragged down in time, in space forever, because we are under external pressure. And here we have Russia as our aggressor state, but even more complicated geopolitical situation. But also, like Danuta has just said, it's about internal pressure to adjust the European Union to the future. So my point is really simple. We need to keep our merit-based approach is fundamentally critical, but we need to create a different sense of the process. We need to create a real pressure, not just on us, but also on the European Union to be successful and not to play long games. We can't afford it. And here, I believe our partnership with Poland is crucial. Many people are talking about new formats, communities, access, whatever. But I believe that our partnership is in the same way important like the current access between France and Germany, because it's something which is creating a sort of backbone for the Central Europe, for understanding that security is in our hands, but also economic momentum could be in our hands. And it's not about creating some sort of threats through shifting balances. It's about creating new opportunities. And we have to talk in a very open, honest way about it, not just trying to create fences, but fundamentally to create opportunities. There is an old Chinese proverb. I know Chinese proverbs are not probably popular with some of you, But it's a simple, wise point that when we have the wind blowing, it's about building windmills and not any kind of fencing off. So fencing off is not an answer anymore. And here, our partnership is something which could create a fundamentally different momentum.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much.
Określoną perspektywę.
So we've got a perspective for a further discussion. And now I would like to request Julia Kazdobina to comment upon this intervention. I would also like to ask you to tell us about the social perspective of Ukrainians, how they perceive accession to the EU. Of course, we know that in Ukraine there is the theater of war, and first of all, you need to win the war. But there is this horizon, achievable horizon, and this is the objective that is strongly related with the victory. So how does this perspective look like when you hear the dialogue? So how do you think that this time horizon is possible?
First and foremost, and thank you for having this conversation, because I believe it's very important. And I think Ukraine, and specifically Ukrainian society, is very serious about joining the European Union, and we have started on this road a long time ago. I mean, we have two Maidans, we had two revolutions that were started by Ukrainian society, Ukrainian people, and they were first was about false elections, and so that's one of the key European Union values, having free and fair democratic elections. And the other one was about signing the agreement with the European Union, but also, in my opinion, it was also about more fundamental things, because you probably remember that Maidan had two stages, and the first stage was about the signing of the agreement, but then the second stage, when actually the revolution erupted, was after students were beaten up by Ukrainian police, and so that was basically Ukrainians raising up against the government brutality and for their rights, and so that's another key European value. And so now when we see Russia punishing us for these aspirations and trying to keep us under its control, this European Union membership has become even a bigger sense for us, because we understand where we want to get and where we are running away from. So we were beginning to understand this big difference between these two systems. And so now the support for European Union membership among Ukrainians is over, if I believe correctly, it's over like 80%, maybe even more. And if previously there was a difference between Western Ukraine, where support was much higher, and Eastern Ukraine and Southern Ukraine, where it was a bit lower, because more people had like family ties with Russia and like spoke the same language and things like that. But now people are seeing what Russia is doing, and so there is a much clearer understanding of what's happening. And in terms of how fast we'll be able to do this, of course, the dates that were voiced by Mr. Michel, they seem to be pretty distant for us, and you know probably that the Ukrainian government talks about being ready in 2 years. Frankly, I don't think that's realistic, but on the other hand, I think I would like to concur with what Mr. Klimkin said, that it's new times, it's new rules, and we do need to speed it up. And I think the message we're getting from European Union officials that like European Union also needs to get ready, and that it needs to be working. So it's not only Ukraine, but European Union as well needs to get ready for this preparation, and there's a need for European Union reform. And so I believe that if we manage to keep this momentum on both sides, we'll make it a lot faster than the timeline Mr. Michel outlined.
Dziękuję bardzo. Piotrze, oczywiście zachęcam.
Piotr, of course I would like to encourage you to share some comments, but I would also like you to address what Pawło Klimkin was talking about partnership between Poland and Ukraine in the light of what happened yesterday about the grain embargo. There were also some other conflicts in July. There was a discussion on history, also on the situation with in Wołyń. So we still remember what Jarosław Kaczyński said when he was talking about obstacles to integration. So what is more realistic to you, the partnership suggested by Pawło Klimkin or instrumentation of accession? Thank you very much. I think that these two aspects of EU integration for Ukraine and the Polish-Ukrainian relations in the dimension you have mentioned, I think it's strongly interrelated, but I would start with a comment on the integration dimension. In my opinion, as Professor has mentioned, the European Union and the member states have change the perspective towards Ukrainian accession membership. So this is a major change in Europe recently. So a Rubicon has been overcome. I do not only mean the status of the candidate to Ukraine, which happened last year. I'm talking about the political atmosphere in Europe, in Germany and in France. So we witness a kind of special change. Before, in the 18 months ago, we couldn't have imagined such a change. So I have this feeling, well, we heard a lot about negotiations, that soon they will start, the decision will soon be made, maybe in December. I hope and I think it will happen in December, but I have some fears connected with a different topic. I think the EU is not ready for extension, for enlargement. Politically, there's a change in politics, in moods, in rhetorics, but when we look at the EU institutions, Professor mentioned some amendments in the treaties. To me, it's a much smaller problem. We do not have to have these amendments. Some amendments can be implemented in the accession treaty. In fact, it's easier. The real discussion is on EU policies and the consequences of European accession to the Union, the agricultural policy, the EU budget. So to me, the most important process is mentioned by Ursula von der Leyen several days ago. She said then that the European Commission shortly will conduct the policy review. It will review EU policies and to check how enlargement will impact these policies. So this will be the true information. It's not a discussion about starting negotiations with Ukraine, but how the member states will approach the results of this review, because we will receive some concrete numbers, amounts, numbers on allocation of EU funding. It will concern agriculture, future budget. So it will be the moment of truth, and this is when the Commission will ask, how do you imagine the process right now based on this information? What kind of consequences we can expect for the EU and the specific member states? And in this compilation, Poland will be one of the first countries. Poland will be affected most. And this process should be really analyzed to establish the consequences. The year 2030, well, I was pleasantly surprised by the proposal by Charles Michel. I suggested myself that the EU should determine an objective to get ready for the year 2030 to have new member states on board. It's not that we want to promise that each candidate country will become the member state, but we need to promise that we will be ready. Our policies, institutions and budgets will be ready by 2030. Maybe it sounds a bit technical, but if we are considering that the enlargement of the EU enlargement with with Ukraine and the Balkan states, if it was to happen in the next decade, this enlargement will have to be carried out during the next EU budget. The next EU budget starts in 2028. So it has to be prepared for enlargement. Now we have it's 2023, so in 2026 this discussion will have to be done with. So if we want to be realistic when we consider the next decade between 2028 and 2034, we need to start these serious discussions right now. Professor probably remembers better than me that 5 years because Poland joined the EU in 1999, the Berlin Agenda was adopted. It was a complex reform of the changes in the European Union. It mainly impacted the budget and agricultural policy, and it made the enlargement possible. And in 2025, during Poland's presidency, the Warsaw Agenda should be adopted. Poland should be a member state. If we are convinced, if we are sure that Ukraine has to join EU, and we think that this is the priority for Poland and for the EU, we should lead this process. And talking about Polish-Ukrainian relations, I am very worried about the state, the condition of these relations. I think that we haven't used the situation. Well, of course, war is very tragic, but something very positive happened in the Polish-Ukrainian relations. So this community of Polish-Ukrainian interests, we have not evolved it. We have only focused on security and our opposition towards imperialistic politics of Russia, and in two key aspects, that is the integration, EU-Ukrainian integrations, and the next issue is the remembrance. To me, it's not of key importance, but it plays a part in our bilateral relations. So we have not achieved any progress, and the Polish government's yesterday decisions, not even the decision, but the attitude in the previous months, the attitude of the Polish government and the dramatic tension that has originated between Poland and Ukraine. And of course, it's about the import of Ukrainian grains to EU. So now we are it's a very difficult time, very difficult moment. So unfortunately, I'm very skeptical to the perspective described by Pawło Klimkin. I don't think it will be possible to have the partnership which would be similar to the French and German partnerships. So these two countries were built the European Commonwealth community, and we are competing for the same resources. So both these countries have to have the will. They have to be convinced that we need to build the partnership, although some costs will have to be paid. We have to be ready to strike some compromise. If we will not behave in this way, we may face a very unpleasant conflict. Professor, could you address to Piotr's intervention, comment? So we're talking about Ukrainian EU integration. This is the priority for Poland. I would like to refer to what Julia has said. The role of societies of Ukrainian citizens is of fundamental importance. We could talk about it for ages, but we need to remember the organized civil society, NGOs that are very mature, that are so committed. I had several meetings with the activists who deal with climate. These are young people who are very mature and very well, they are very well educated. They speak foreign languages. It's not the situation in many EU member states. So once they join the EU, we will have to care of democracy, and NGOs are necessary to do this. The budget 2028-2034 will be incredibly important. It will be a similar situation as with Berlin Agenda, that the general amount will be established and then it will be divided among the states. But Ukrainian demography will be of key importance. So I'm sorry I'm talking about this, but demography is also the victim of this war. So Ukraine has to remember this. I would like to stress another aspect, that there will be this review of policies, there will be evaluation. I think it will start after summer holidays. It will be initiated by the Commission, and we need to remember that negotiations represent a process where you adapt capacity of both parties. I'm always telling Ukrainian colleagues that you need to deal with, you need to go ahead to generate some benefits. We had to negotiate many areas, many quotas, many derogations were negotiated. The process took many years. We were afraid that Germans were going to come to Poland with the buckets to take Polish soil abroad. So we can resolve many issues. There are different transitional periods, so some specific solutions will be elaborated. I have a different view from Pawło when it comes to this cooperation, special cooperation between Kiev and Warsaw. Maybe because it's not my government here. That's why maybe I cannot imagine this. I think that Ukraine has to be very careful with this approach, because in Ukraine's interest is to join the EU fully, to sit at the table, the main table. And we don't know who will represent Poland when Ukraine will be joining the EU. I know that people are now convinced that the European center is moving east, but we have to be prudent. We have to do anything possible to make sure that the Ukraine is at the main table, that they have the full right to speak, to decide. So we do not want it to work in the environment of pressure and tensions. The French and the German pair was developing for many years. The EU needed an avant-garde. So now this process will look differently. We have some time. We need to resolve issues. We do not want to hear such offensive contribution from the Polish partners as we hear today. Let's wait for Ukraine first to join the EU.
And now over to you, Minister. I'm talking to Pawło Klimkin. You emphasized the role of a Polish-Ukrainian partnership, but to what extent what is happening around cereals do you interpret as a part of game, being a part of Polish election campaign, or warning against real conflict of interests? As Piotr Buras said, we are going to compete for the same resources in the European Union because we've got similar potential, so the conflict can be structural and not purely political. Aren't you afraid of it? And does the current situation can the current situation escalate? Because if the Ukrainian government submits a claim against Poland to WTO and includes the global South countries, it will pose Poland in a very difficult situation, which might go to a wrong direction.
I can't agree more, and I believe the answer on your point is actually both. It's about the electoral campaign, but it's also about a bigger issue, about how we see the future Ukraine's joining the European Union. And of course, we clearly have a number of elements of competition. I don't see them as kind of irreparable fractures. What I see as a sad experience from all this grain spin is actually that we can't effectively sort out issues in the way we had to. It's about transit, it's about export, it's about distinguishing them, it's about eliminating any possibility for a kind of gray business. And we failed, and actually we both failed. And I agree, there are going to be elements on competition, but I've said it already. Without fundamentally changing the nature of CAP, Common Agricultural Policy, we are nowhere. We can't have the same logic and the same mechanism of the CAP and get Ukraine and the Western Balkans in the same way. It's about regional policy, and Danuta knows it better than anybody of us. So, of course, we're going to have ups and downs, very difficult issues on our agenda. And don't get me wrong, when talking about our potential partnership, I'm not trying to somehow get it and see it similar to the French-German axis. I'm talking about something else. I said the answers are fundamentally different. And it's about us to have this sense of partnership or not to have. And the clear question is, are we now fighting together against someone? And in this case, Putin's Russia, the answer is clearly yes. Are we fighting together for our common future in the European Union and basically for what we should have in the future? The answer is definitely no, or at least not yet. And I'm not naive or so, and in saying that we need to copy French-German format. We can't, and neither we don't have to. But we need to look into the issue how the future interaction in the new and enlarged Central Europe could take place. Whether it's about fundamentally the sense of competition and the sense of bickering, and in this case, it's the same kind of European Union with the clear center of gravity in the so-called classic or old Europe, whatever you call it, or we can have something else, and we can predict what's gonna happen. Let's say in 7 and 10 years, I'd say the development could be mind blowing. So it's about us to see whether we can have the old pattern of all kind of problems, or we can have something fundamentally different. And of course, we need to prepare ourselves, but in the same way, the European Union should change, whether it's with treaty changes, without treaty changes. If you ask me, we're gonna join a different European Union in some years from now, whether it's for the good or for the bad, for worse. I actually believe it's the first one, and it's not about politics. Whether it's about Ukraine and Poland, we somehow get used that it's this government or that government. But geopolitics has changed. The reality has changed around us, and again, it's up to us to decide what kind of reality we would like to set up around us. If we are fine with just a sort of competition pattern, it's set with me, but I believe we have to be fundamentally more ambitious, because either we believe that everything what is happening now has changed us, or it's basically the same pattern. And if it's the case, we're going to get lost, as simple as that.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much. And the last question goes to Julia Kazdobina, but I would like to ask one more question, because Mr. Klimkin introduced the geopolitical aspect regardless of the conditions for victory, but Russia will still be a very important player. How do you perceive the role of Russia when it comes to expansion of the European Union and including Ukraine? How is Russia going to behave?
I would like to add something to what was discussed before, and I think that although clearly there are some structural factors present, but I think we have at least two positive things. One is that it's an economic conflict, and so economic conflict can usually be resolved by, like you add a little bit here, you add a little there, or it's easier to find compromises on economic issues than, for example, on issues of ethnicity or other things, right? So I think if both sides are actually aimed at finding a solution, it's a lot easier. And so in this respect, I think we can do it, and I think that there is now a very positive momentum in relations between Poland and Ukraine, despite of these difficulties. And I think that even though there was this really emotional reaction on both sides at some point, and there was some blame exchange, but still, now it's calmer. We still keep talking, and at least from the Polish side, as we can, until we reach a solution. So there is clearly an intention to reach a solution, and so hopefully, I think it's possible, right? So at least we're talking, and at least in Ukrainian society, there is a very positive attitude towards Poland. There is a lot of gratefulness and thankfulness for everything, and there is a lot of there is a very clear understanding of Poland's role in this war and Poland's support and Poland's active role in European institutions and NATO and pushing Germany to help Ukraine. So I think that creates a really good basis, of course. But we do understand that this is not only because of elections that this issue arises. When we're talking about Russia, of course, it's Russia. The issue that Russia mentioned, that was extension of NATO, that it called as a threat to itself. So it was not. It was also opposed to Ukraine's membership in the European Union because Russia at the same time was trying to build its own. But I think at this point, Russia's reaction doesn't really matter, because at this point we got to the situation where it's either us or them, right? And so whoever prevails gets what that country wants. And so when they got the situation to the full-scale aggression, basically we're not going to discuss with them our future, because against them our goal is to survive, basically. And so whatever they do, it's the issue of if they have enough power to make us do what they want. And for us, it's the issue to have enough power to stop them and to get them out of Ukraine and to build Ukraine the way we want it to be built.
Dziękuję bardzo. Piotrze, króciutka kwestia dotycząca tej perspektywy, o której mówi Charles Michel.
Piotr, when we talk about the perspective mentioned by Charles Michel, 2030, that's the perspective when Poland and Hungary will become net payers for the EU budget. In the Polish political elites, we observe it with concern. Orban says, who pays for the orchestra gets the music they want. How should we approach this change? Will it be a minor game changer, the shift in the EU? I suppose it will be, but I still do hope that for the period of the next few years, we'll manage to change the discourse about Europe in Poland. It is a completely falsified approach to the European Union, even in the economic aspect. It's nonsense paying so much attention to financial flows from the European Union, whether they are net payer or not, does not mention the benefits of the European integration. Trade, common market is much more important than any money we got from the EU. In the conditions of our political argument, this is a real disaster. The National Recovery Fund that has become a subject of political argument, and the whole discussion on the European Union focused on whether we will get the money or we won't, because we should and spend it, and we should invest it. We should not consume it or spend it, but simply invest it. But this leads to focusing on the money as the only benefit of the integration. From the point of view of Ukrainian membership in the EU, we'll face an inevitable situation when we become a net payer, and this results from our success. We have become economically stronger, so we should be the net payer as quickly as possible, and it will be very good. But there is a challenge to change the language of the discussion. It is easy to manipulate and to use it in the public debate by those who use the anti-European mood to gain profit. We've got some minutes left, so if we have any questions, we have the time for 2 questions. We can see a gentleman over there.
Halo, dzień dobry.
Good evening.
Chciałem zapytać o jedną rzecz. Czy
I
Polska
would like to
wykonała
ask the following thing.
swojej atrakcyjności
Isn't Poland using its attractiveness as the partner of Ukraine in relation to the fact that the current ruling party
Federacja prezentują
present anti-European approach, extremely anti-European approach? So no formats, triangles, or the Visegrad group, which was mentioned as the collaboration example of international collaboration, do not function.
że stajemy się
So consequently, aren't we becoming the second line or third line partner?
Dziękuję bardzo. Może jeszcze
Thank
jedno
you.
pytanie.
And there is one more question.
Dzień dobry. Głos
Good
Edwin Bendyk,
evening.
prezes Zrzeszenia Ukraińskiego Biznesu w Polsce.
I am the president of the Ukrainian Association in Poland. I do agree with Mr. Klimkin that Polish-Ukrainian partnership is very important. It seems that during the next years the Polish-Ukrainian partnership can be the indicator of a success. The main direction of grain export was the Black Sea. When there is peace and possibility to export, we'll find the answer to the questions. 2 or 3 days ago, the Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development said that Ukrainian's membership in the EU is conditional. Hence the question to the Madam Commissioner whether it's possible to have conditional membership. Thank you very much. Let's start with the answer to the first question. Julia.
Czy Polska nie traci na atrakcyjności?
Isn't Poland losing its attractiveness due to anti-European nature of the government's policy?
I don't think that's going to happen because we're not seeing, I mean, there's definitely changes in Polish politics, but we're not seeing that getting to the mainstream, right? So that still remains, it's not the key. And no, I don't think that's the danger.
Okej. Pawło, panie ministrze, czy no właśnie Polska...
All right, Minister, Poland with its Ukrainian policy is an asset or an obstacle for integration?
It could be both. It depends what angle you see it, and I agree with Julia. Actually, for the dominating majority of Ukrainians, Poland is seen through a positive angle. And many people are worried, but it's not seen and perceived as a fundamental obstacle because security and common fight it what covers our mentality. But in the case of changing or shifting even this balance, yes, there could be changes. But in the sense of political configuration here or in Poland, of course, our relations would depend on it. But we need a sense of sustainability. We need a kind of common ground. And I mean common ground and not the lowest denominator, in the sense of understanding common positive priorities. It's what I've said. It's about understanding what we should fight for, not just against. And if we fail, fundamentally, it's two different options for the Central Europe, but also for Europe as such.
Dziękuję bardzo, pani komisarz. Pytanie do pani było.
Madam Commissioner, there was a question to you, and we are about to wrap up. Okay, I would like to say we need to remember the 27 member states and there is election in each member state. So we together, regardless of the political group winning in a specific country and what relations it has with us, we collaborate in making decisions and in voting. This is what we will have to get used to. But we can see in Poland a different case because the government and the ruling party reject the values for which Ukrainians die. And this is really a depressing thing for us all. Ukraine can contribute to a change in Poland. It's very important what Piotr mentioned, namely we need to give up the rhetoric that only the money determine the benefits of being a member state. According to research, the more advanced and the more developed the country is, the more it profits from the EU trade and the internal market. And this is something that Poland should be prepared for. Conditional membership, there is no such thing, but during the negotiations, there are things which are non-negotiable related to democracy, rule of law. You cannot discuss them, while policies can be negotiated. And these are not prerequisites or conditions. These are transition periods. You want to enter the European Union labor market, or you would like to all Ukrainians to come back to Ukraine and reconstruct your country. It might change. And it will be different than in our case 20 years ago. You need to remember they are non-negotiable. We talked about Warsaw-Kiev relationship and friendship. We need to be friends with all member states. But the most important thing is to build a group of Ukrainian friends in the Council. We were lucky to have Chancellor Kohl, who established such a group of friends in favor of the extension, and he was an advocate of such an extension. The group of Ukrainian friends is very important for the moment of hardship during the negotiations, when we won't agree with you and you won't agree with the European Union. We'll have to strike the compromise. It's always easier to move on when you have the group who can understand the Ukrainian interest. Let's build such a group of friends together in the Council, because some countries might have a referendum on Ukrainian joining the EU, and there can be a shift towards the right, including the election for the European Parliament. That's why we need to secure the friendship for Ukraine in the sense of confirming the whole process. Thank you very much. We have reached the end of our discussion, and I would like to thank Julia Kazdobina, Piotr Buras, Danuta Hübner, and Pawło Klimkin. And I would like to thank the audience for your attention, comments, and questions. That's not the end of our agenda. More points to follow. We wish you a nice evening and a nice day tomorrow. Thank you very much.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Jestem z zawodu lekarzem, zajmowała się diagnostyką chorób nowotworowych.
W Białorusi zajmowałam się mikrobiologią i molekularną biologią.
Byłem nauczycielem szkoły podstawowej.
Naszym celem jest budowanie umiejętności, które są ważne na polskim rynku pracy.
Szybko nabierają takiej pewności siebie, bardzo szybko się uczą.
Wszystko możliwe, kiedy starasz się.
Każdy wybór ma swoje konsekwencje.
Dziś na kazaniu o takich jak ty mówili, że to morderczynie.
A wiesz, że ta, która ci pomogła, trafi za kraty?
Trzeba mieć sumienie.
Jak mogłaś to zrobić własnej matce?
Aborcja to najgorsza zbrodnia.
Gdybym ja podjęła taką decyzję, nie byłoby cię tutaj.
Organy państwa nie będą przyglądać się temu obojętnie.
Życie i zdrowie kobiety jest najważniejsze.
Stop kryminalizacji aborcji.
Kobieta decyduje.
Dzień dobry. To znaczy, myśmy się dzisiaj widzieli. Wie pan co? Ja zmieniłem zdanie i chciałbym poprawić. Karty. W urnie. Dobrze? To ja sobie poszukam.
Serio? Pan sobie poszuka? Nadchodzące wybory są zbyt ważne, by zostawić je bez kontroli. Dołącz do obywatelskiej kontroli wyborów. Zróbmy wybory bez picu.